you just mentioned in passing sex scenes, and I think it was in the context of the reader isn't going to care about what's going on unless they care about the people who are involved.
Sure.
You know, talking about it in terms of action sequences, but you can easily see how that would apply to sex scenes as well.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I've got to believe that there's a lot of overlap between the advice you give in about action sequences and the advice you give about sex scenes. Whoops, didn't do that right. Sex scenes.
That was action twice.
Oh, did I have action twice?
Yeah.
There's the sex scenes one. So what advice do you have if people are sitting down getting ready to write a sex scene?
Yeah.
What advice that you've spoken about regarding action sequences should they carry forward into the sex scenes?
Yeah, I mean, it's really not a coincidence that action sequences went with sex scenes in this book, because the sex scene is an action scene. It's just another type, and it's something that I think that a lot of people have questions about, and a lot of people have issues with, and so it basically deserves. I got it too. It basically just its own section that was almost equal in length. Yes, all the things that I spoke about in action sequences can be applied to the sex scenes. Sex scenes, do you care about your character? Because if you don't, why are you going to care about the sex? It's not like a movie where we can see, or a TV show or whatever, where we can see things that titillate us, because that's not reading. You can't see them unless you're creating it in your head. So you have to enable readers to be able to create those images in their head. And to do that, they're going to have to care enough to do it. It takes work to envision the story. That's why having consistency is so important, because if you interrupt the work that they're doing their part, you have to do your part and not bother them, not interrupt them, and not go, oh, but wait, there's this thing that has nothing to do with what we were just talking about. Keep them immersed. So yes, for your sex scenes, it's all about character. I think even more so, sex scenes are about character. You have to care. Otherwise, you can write sex that's meaningless. That's absolutely acceptable. Can be a good plot point. Could be a good conflict beat. But if you want them to care, then you're going to have to write really strong characters, and you're going to have to give them penetration, no pun intended, so that they understand the desires and the goals and the risks that the characters are taking when they enter into a sex act of some kind.
The other thing that I think can very easily take a reader out of a sex scene, and this sort of harks back to the terminology you use to describe the action. We'll see how we can do with this one in something that should be PG, but I've often been taken out of those scenes as a reader by some jarring word referring to a piece of anatomy.
Yeah.
So what's your advice on that front?
First, create a list of words that do that. Don't use those words. I talk about it in the book, and I give a bunch of examples of things that should be on your no-fly list, because they are either not sexy, they will create a stumbling block rather than create a smooth scene. Yeah, so you don't want to use those words, because readers will hit them, and especially in a scene where it's a little bit, potentially for the reader, a little bit awkward or a little bit nerve-wracking or embarrassing for them to read it. If you come across a word that enhances those feelings, then they're going to start skipping around. They're going to put the book down potentially. Worst case scenario is like, oh, I can't. This is too much for me. I thought this was a fantasy story, and bye-bye book. Lost potential fan. So you have to be very wary about what words you use. And like I said, I think I have maybe 2 sections in sex scenes about why that is and what words to potentially avoid, and urging readers to create their own no-fly lists, so that if in the stream of writing you hit one of those words, you put it down, you don't even notice because you're just going with the flow, that you can go back later and you can search for it and be like, oh, I used that 3 times. Especially if, and that's another good thing to look for words that you've used too much, too frequently, one right after another. And you want to change those. You don't want to use the same word over and over again. A word that's going to stand out a lot, for example, is breasts. If you have a scene where breasts are involved and you're mentioning breasts, and you say breasts in a sentence, and then you go to the next sentence and you say breasts again, and then you skip the sentence and you say breasts a third time, that is going to pull your readers out of the story because, oh my God, this word, why is it being repeated over and over?
Yeah.
Unless you have a really good reason, a storytelling reason why you are repeating that, or you're trying to evoke some sort of actual, maybe experimental writing technique, then you are going to want to change 2 of those words. Have it in there once. And then on the next page, maybe if you need to use it again.